The emergency session began like any other crisis meeting in the Galactic Federation's Grand Chamber, with urgent messages and flashing priority alerts. But when junior analyst Marcus Reed burst through the quantum-sealed doors, his scales nearly white with terror, the assembled representatives knew this was different. The chamber's crystal walls pulsed with an eerie blue light as 17 of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy turned their attention to the trembling analyst. Reed's species, the Serpentine Nexara, were known for their unshakable composure. Seeing one in such distress sent ripples of unease through the assembly. Honorable Council. Reed's voice wavered as he activated the holographic display. The conflict between the Vazrith Empire and the Nexus Collective has reached a critical point. The display showed two massive areas of space highlighted in angry red and cold blue, their borders pushing against each other like tectonic plates about to rupture. High Counselor Zena, her crystalline form catching the light, as she leaned forward, spoke with the weight of centuries. "We are aware of the war's expansion," Analyst Reed. "Why have you interrupted our emergency session?" The young analyst's claws danced across the holographic controls, and the display zoomed in on a seemingly insignificant section of space. "Our predictive models show the conflict will reach this sector within 6 standard months." He paused, his inner eyelids flickering rapidly. "It contains the Sol system." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices and psychic projections of alarm. High Counselor Zena's crystalline surface darkened to a deep purple, a sign of extreme distress among her kind. "Impossible," thundered Ambassador Krell, his massive form rising from the reinforced gravity seat. "The containment protocols around Sol system are the strongest we've ever implemented. No conflict can penetrate." "The protocols won't hold," Reed interrupted, a breach of protocol that shocked the chamber into silence. He expanded the display, showing complex energy patterns that even the most advanced civilizations in the room struggled to comprehend. "The combined forces of both sides will create a resonance cascade that will shatter our barriers like glass." The revelation hit the Council like a physical force. They all knew what it meant. Earth would be exposed to the conflict. And more importantly, the conflict would be exposed to Earth. "Have you considered," spoke a quiet voice from the shadows, "what will happen when humans learn not only of our existence, but of our efforts to contain them?" The speaker was Ambassador Vex, whose species had made first contact with 37 civilizations. All had gone smoothly, except one. Reed's scales rippled with new patterns of fear. "We have run 10,000 simulations, Ambassador, in every scenario where humans enter this conflict." He trailed off, his professional demeanor cracking. "Show us," commanded High Counselor Zena. The holographic display shifted, showing multiple timeline branches. In each one, the introduction of human forces led to an exponential escalation, not because of their technology, which was centuries behind both the Vazrith and the Nexus Collective, but because of something far more dangerous: their creativity. "Humans don't think like us," Reed explained, his voice steadying as he slipped into analysis mode. "They don't follow logical progression paths. When faced with superior technology, they don't surrender or adapt. They innovate in ways that defy all known parameters." The display showed examples: primitive nuclear weapons combined with captured advanced tech to create planet-cracking devices, basic chemical propulsion systems modified to achieve impossible faster-than-light speeds, simple radio waves weaponized to disrupt the most sophisticated communication networks. "If they enter this war," Reed concluded, "they won't just join a side. They'll revolutionize combat itself." And based on our studies of their history, he let the thought hang in the air. The council chamber fell into a heavy silence. They all knew human history, a species that had gone from first flight to landing on their moon in less than 7 decades, a species that had split the atom less than a century after discovering electricity. High Counselor Zena's voice cut through the silence. Then our course is clear. Earth must be protected from this conflict, not for their sake, but for the survival of all. As the council began debating emergency measures, none of them noticed the small anomaly in Reed's data, a tiny signal suggesting that somewhere on Earth, someone was already building something that would make all their precautions meaningless. Dr. Amanda Sterling stared at the data scrolling across her screens in NASA's Deep Space Research Division, her coffee long since gone cold. The numbers weren't just wrong. They were impossible. She triple-checked the calibrations on the new long-range detection array. Yet, the readings persisted. "Hey boss," called Marcus Thompson, her senior technical lead, from his station. "Remember those energy spikes we detected last week? They're back. And they're stronger." His fingers flew across the holographic interface, bringing up a three-dimensional map of the outer solar system. "Look at this pattern." Amanda leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing, as she studied the display. The energy signatures formed an almost perfect sphere around the solar system, like a massive bubble extending well beyond Pluto's orbit. "It's too perfect to be natural," she muttered, pulling up historical data from the past 6 months. "That's not all," Marcus added, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Watch what happens when I apply the new quantum interference filter." The display shifted, showing tiny ripples in the energy field, ripples that moved with clear purpose and intelligence. Amanda's heart raced as she processed the implications. "Someone's maintaining this field," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "And they're trying very hard to hide it from us." The lab door hissed open as Dr. James Norton, the project's chief physicist, hurried in. His usually immaculate lab coat was wrinkled, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been up all night. "Amanda, we need to talk. Privately." In her office, James pulled out a tablet and placed it on her desk. 3 other research stations have detected similar anomalies. The Chinese Academy of Sciences, the European Space Agency, and an independent observatory in Chile. He paused, running a hand through his gray hair. "But here's the strange part. Every time we try to focus our instruments on these phenomena, the readings either disappear or become corrupted." Amanda felt a chill run down her spine, almost as if something's actively interfering with our observations. She pulled up her own research notes. "I've been tracking similar patterns. Whatever this is, it's responsive. It adapts to our detection methods." "There's more," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Remember that new quantum telescope array we were planning to bring online next month? Yesterday, every single component failed quality control tests, components that had already passed previous inspections." Amanda's mind raced through the possibilities. If something was actively working to keep Earth from looking too closely at space, it meant 2 things. They weren't alone in the universe, and someone was going to extraordinary lengths to keep them in the dark. She made a decision. "Get me everything we have on failed space observation projects from the last 5 years. And Marcus," she called through the open door, "pull up every instance of unexplained instrument failure or data corruption in our deep space monitoring programs." As her team worked, Amanda began to see a pattern emerge. It wasn't just random interference. There was a clear progression. As Earth's technology had advanced, the interruptions had become more sophisticated, more targeted. Whatever was out there was adapting to keep pace with human innovation. "Dr. Sterling," Marcus's voice cracked slightly, "I think you need to see this." He'd created a timeline of the anomalies, but instead of looking at individual events, he'd mapped the overall pattern of the energy field's behavior. The barrier isn't just containing us. It's getting stronger, like it's preparing for something. Amanda stared at the projection, her mind already racing ahead to the implications. "No," she said slowly, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's not just getting stronger. It's getting desperate." She turned to her team, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. And that means whatever's out there, whatever they're trying to hide from us, they're afraid we're getting close to breaking through. As if in response to her words, every screen in the lab flickered for a split second, displaying a series of complex symbols before returning to normal. Only Amanda, her fingers already flying over her keyboard to capture the image, realized what it meant. They weren't just being watched. They were being warned. The Atacama Desert erupted in a column of blue fire that turned night into day. Dr. Jack Reynolds watched the footage on his tablet for the 100th time, his private jet already descending toward a remote Chilean airstrip. As a former military engineer turned independent contractor, he'd seen his share of strange phenomena. But this was different. Local military has already cordoned off the area, said Rebecca Martinez, his head of security, scrolling through encrypted messages on her phone. Official story is a failed satellite re-entry. She paused, a slight smile playing at her lips. Funny thing is, no one's claiming to have lost a satellite. Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on the infrared analysis of the crash site. Because whatever came down last night wasn't coming from orbit. He zoomed in on the impact pattern. It was coming from outside the solar system. Their team was on the ground within an hour of landing. Through his military contacts and Rebecca's network of informants, they'd learned that 3 other groups were racing to the crash site. The Chilean military, a Chinese research team, and an unidentified unit moving with professional precision. We've got maybe 2 hours before the others arrive, Rebecca said, checking her watch. Our drone shows some kind of energy field forming around the area. Jack suited up in the modified hazmat gear he'd designed for unknown environment exploration. Then we'd better move fast. He'd learned long ago that in situations like this, being first mattered more than being best prepared. The crash site was unlike anything he'd expected. The ground had been vitrified into perfect hexagonal patterns, and at the center lay what could only be described as a ship, though it followed no aerodynamic principles known to Earth science. Multiple heat signatures approaching from the north. Rebecca's voice crackled through his comm. You've got 40 minutes, tops. Jack worked methodically, his trained eyes identifying what looked like a damaged section of the hull. The material was unlike any alloy he'd ever seen, yet something about its structure seemed familiar. Inside the breach, he found what he was looking for, a device about the size of a football, its surface covered in shifting patterns that seemed to respond to his presence. Years of experience told him this was the kind of technology that could change everything. Jack, Rebecca's voice was tense. We've got company. The unidentified team just deployed some kind of stealth tech. They're moving faster than should be possible. He secured the device in his specialized containment unit just as a high-pitched whine filled the air. The sound seemed to bypass his ears and strike directly at his brain. Fall back to extraction point beta, he ordered, already moving. They're using sonic suppression tech. Our window's closing. The race back to their hidden transport was a blur of desert heat and pulsing energy fields. Twice, Jack caught glimpses of figures moving with inhuman grace, their forms seeming to bend light around them. But his team had planned for this, using local geographic features and pre-planted counter-surveillance measures to break line of sight. 24 hours later, in a secured lab beneath his private research facility in Nevada, Jack stared at the initial analysis results with a mix of awe and concern. The device wasn't just advanced. It was impossible. Its power source operated on principles that contradicted known physics, yet its basic structure followed patterns he recognized from his work on experimental propulsion systems. They're not just ahead of us technologically, he told his assembled team of hand-picked scientists. They're using the same basic concepts we theorized, just taken to their extreme conclusion. He brought up a simulation on the main screen. And that means we can understand it. More importantly, We can improve it." As his team began their work, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The alien device pulsed with a soft blue light, its patterns shifting in ways that seemed almost worried. In the Atacama Desert, the Federation's recovery team leader reported a complete mission failure. Not only had they lost the crashed scout ship's core drive, but their worst fears were confirmed. Humans had already begun to understand the technology, and if their predictive models were correct, it wouldn't be long before these primitive beings started making it better. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex had seen its share of secret meetings, but nothing like this. In a newly constructed chamber 300 feet below the standard military levels, Dr. Amanda Sterling stood before a gathering of the world's most brilliant minds. The room hummed with barely contained energy as scientists from rival nations sat shoulder to shoulder, united by a single purpose. "The barrier is real," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "And it's not just containing us. It's actively suppressing our technological development." Behind her, holographic displays showed the energy field that encircled their solar system, now visible thanks to the combined data from every major observatory on Earth. Dr. Jack Reynolds stepped forward, placing the alien device on the central platform. "This is what they don't want us to have." The device pulsed with an inner light, its surface patterns shifting like liquid metal. "My team has spent 2 weeks studying it. What we've learned changes everything we thought we knew about physics." Colonel Michael Hayes, known throughout military circles as the man who thought in impossible angles, moved to stand beside the device. His weathered face broke into an almost predatory smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Project Thunderbolt." He gestured to the device, "Our ticket out of this cosmic prison." The next hour was a rapid-fire exchange of ideas that would have been impossible just months ago. Chinese quantum computing experts collaborated with Silicon Valley AI developers, while Russian nuclear physicists debated theory with American fusion researchers. The artificial boundaries of nations dissolved in the face of a greater challenge. "The key isn't just understanding their technology," Dr. Reynolds explained, bringing up detailed scans of the device. "It's recognizing where they went wrong." He highlighted a section of the power core. "They built this using perfect mathematical models, but they never considered imperfect solutions." Dr. Sterling picked up the thread, her eyes bright with understanding. "Our primitive nuclear fusion research, it's not a disadvantage. We've spent decades working with imperfect systems, finding ways to make them work despite their flaws." She pulled up data from her own research. "What if we combined our raw, unrefined approach with their precision?" Colonel Hayes slammed his hand on the table, making several scientists jump. "That's it. They've built a perfect cage, but they've never had to deal with someone trying to break it using imperfect methods." He turned to the assembled group. "We don't need to match their technology. We need to break it using what we already have." The room erupted in excited discussion as the implications became clear. Earth's greatest disadvantage, its crude technology, might be its greatest strength. The alien barrier was designed to contain a civilization following a predictable development path. It wasn't prepared for a species that would throw mathematical perfection out the window in favor of raw innovation. "We've got 17 research teams around the world ready to begin," Dr. Sterling announced, bringing up a global map marked with glowing points. "Each one will attack the barrier from a different angle, using everything from modified nuclear reactors to experimental quantum fields." Dr. Reynolds added, "And thanks to the device, we know their energy signatures. We can see where the barrier is weakest." He highlighted several points in the holographic display. "They're so focused on perfection. They never considered someone might look for the flaws in their design." Colonel Hayes stood before the group, his presence commanding attention. "In 72 hours, we launch a coordinated attack on the barrier. Not with their perfect technology, but with our messy, unpredictable, Human innovation. He smiled. Let's show them why they should have left the cage open. As the teams dispersed to their assigned stations, Dr. Sterling noticed something strange about the alien device. Its patterns had changed, shifting in what almost looked like anticipation. She wondered if perhaps it wasn't just a power source, but something more. Something that had been waiting for a species crazy enough to think outside the perfect box. High above Earth, the Federation's monitoring systems began detecting energy signatures that should have been impossible from a contained world. In the Grand Chamber, Analyst Reed watched in horror as humanity prepared to shatter their celestial cage using methods that no advanced species would ever have considered valid. The United Nations General Assembly Hall had never been so silent. Representatives from every nation stared at the holographic figures standing before them. 7 beings of such alien design that the human mind struggled to process their forms. The Federation's first contact team had chosen their most human-like members, yet they still seemed like living abstract art. Ambassador Vex, his crystalline form refracting light in impossible ways, spoke with carefully modulated tones. We come before you as guardians and protectors. For centuries, we have shielded your world from. Shielded? Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Blackwood's voice cut through the hall like a knife. She stood from her position among the Joint Chiefs' representatives, her dress uniform immaculate, her expression one of calculated amusement. Is that what you call a prison? The Federation team's collective shock rippled through the room. As a physical force, Ambassador Vex's surface patterns shifted in what humans would later learn was extreme distress. We don't understand your meaning. Blackwood smiled, the kind of smile that had made hardened generals rethink their strategies. Computer, display Project Thunderbolt results. The air above the assembly filled with a new hologram, this one showing the solar system and the now visible containment barrier. Would you like to know how many times we've broken through your shield in the past week? Dr. Amanda Sterling stepped forward from the scientific advisory section, her tablet projecting data streams. 17 breaches, using 7 different methods. My personal favorite was the modified fusion pulse that treated your quantum barrier like a soap bubble. She paused, making eye contact with each alien delegate. Though the Chilean team's use of repurposed microwave technology was particularly elegant, the Federation team's horror was palpable. One of them, a being of pure energy contained within a metallic shell, actually flickered. Impossible, it whispered in a voice like static. Your technology is centuries behind. Your technology, Colonel Hayes interrupted, rising to stand beside Blackwood, is built on the assumption that there's only one right way to do things. He nodded to a young lieutenant who activated a small device. Suddenly, the Federation team's personal shields they hadn't even announced they were using, became visible, then winked out. We found the unified field theory 3 days ago, Dr. Reynolds added casually from his seat, not even looking up from his notes. Turns out you overcomplicated it. Our primitive understanding led us to a much simpler solution. Ambassador Vex made a motion that might have been the alien equivalent of straightening his tie. You don't understand. The barrier was for your protection. There's a war coming. We know, Blackwood cut in again. We've been watching your war for months. The Vazrith Empire and the Nexus Collective are on a collision course that intersects with our system. She nodded to Sterling, who brought up a new display showing ship movements and battle patterns. Your containment field made for an excellent observation post, once we turned it into a two-way mirror. The Federation team huddled together, their communication methods now visible thanks to the humans' counter-technology. Ambassador Vex finally turned back, his voice carrying a new note of respect and fear. What do you want? Blackwood's expression softened slightly. First, we want the truth. All of it. Then we're going to have a very long discussion about the future of galactic diplomacy." She gestured to the seats before the assembly. "And this time, you're going to listen." As the Federation team moved to their assigned places, Dr. Sterling's tablet pinged with an alert. The alien device they'd recovered had started pulsing in a new pattern. She smiled as she decoded its meaning. It wasn't just a power source or a weapon. It was a test, left by someone who had hoped humanity would be clever enough to see past the perfect prison to find the imperfect solution. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Federation, Analyst Reed watched the proceedings through their monitoring systems. He noticed something that everyone else had missed. The humans hadn't just broken through the barrier. They'd turned it into a defense system of their own design. Earth wasn't just free. It was now protected by a shield more powerful than anything the Federation had ever created, built from the very chains that were meant to hold it. The diplomatic chamber aboard the neutral space station gleamed with an almost painful brilliance. On one side sat the Vazrith Empire's delegation, their biomechanical forms humming with barely contained energy. On the other, the Nexus Collective's representatives maintained their characteristic crystalline stillness. Between them, at a round table that Dr. Jack Reynolds had specifically designed for this meeting, sat Earth's diplomatic team. "Your solutions are unacceptable," growled Supreme Commander Xarax of the Vazrith, his voice resonating through multiple harmonic frequencies. "The Collective's expansion into the Orion Arm cannot be tolerated. Your military presence in neutral systems is an existential threat," responded Prime Consciousness Lyra of the Collective, her crystalline form shifting through patterns that expressed deep concern. "We cannot allow." "You're both wrong," Dr. Reynolds interrupted, standing to project a hologram above the table. "And you're both right. That's what makes this so interesting." He nodded to Colonel Hayes, who had traded his military uniform for diplomatic attire. Hayes stepped forward, his eyes moving between both delegations. "We've spent the last month analyzing your conflict from every angle. Military, economic, cultural." He paused, letting the translation systems catch up. "But more importantly, we've been looking at what you're not saying." The hologram shifted to show a complex web of trade routes, military movements, and cultural exchange points. Dr. Sterling, who had been quietly working on her tablet, added new layers of data that made both delegations lean forward in surprise. "The Vazrith Empire," Hayes continued, "isn't actually concerned about military expansion. Your fleet movements show a defensive pattern." He highlighted several key points. "You're protecting something cultural." Supreme Commander Xarax's biomechanical components whirred in what might have been discomfort. "How did you?" "And the Nexus Collective," Sterling cut in. "Your crystal matrices show stress patterns consistent with environmental adaptation, not combat preparation. You're not looking for a fight. You're looking for survival." Prime Consciousness Lyra's surface rippled with surprise recognition. "Our sacred gardens are dying," Reynolds completed the thought, "because they need a specific type of crystal that can only be found in Vazrith space, the same crystal that forms the core of their most important religious sites." He smiled. "We humans have a long history of fighting wars over resources that both sides consider sacred. We've also found ways to stop fighting." The room fell silent as both delegations processed this information. Hayes used the moment to spring their trap, not one of violence or deception, but of understanding. "The Vazrith Empire has been terraforming planets for millennia," he said, bringing up new data. "And the Nexus Collective are masters of crystal engineering. But neither of you ever thought to compare notes." He looked between them. "What if you could grow these sacred crystals? Create new sites that hold meaning for both your peoples?" Dr. Sterling added, "We've already done preliminary studies using samples from both your worlds. The crystal structures are compatible with Vazrith terraforming technology. With some modifications we can help with, You could create entire worlds of these sacred materials. The tension in the room shifted. Supreme Commander Xarax and Prime Consciousness Lyra exchanged looks that transcended their alien nature. Looks of cautious hope. "But why?" asked Lyra. "Why would you help us find peace when you could let us destroy each other and take our territory?" Reynolds laughed, a sound that startled both delegations. "Because that would be boring. Creating something new, something that's never existed before. That's what humans live for." Hayes stepped forward again, his expression serious. "We're offering to help you build something together. Research stations, joint colonies, new worlds that combine the best of both your cultures." He smiled. "Think of it as a cultural exchange program, with some light terraforming on the side." As the two ancient civilizations began to cautiously discuss terms, the Federation's observers watched in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just avoided taking sides in the conflict. They'd found a way to make the conflict itself obsolete, and they'd done it not through superior technology or military might, but through something far more powerful: the ability to see past ancient hatreds to new possibilities. In the corner of the room, the alien device that had started it all pulsed with a pattern that almost looked like applause. The Ceres installation gleamed like a diamond against the asteroid belt's darkness. Dr. Amanda Sterling stood at the observation deck, watching as massive construction drones converted the nearby asteroids into what her team had dubbed the galaxy's greatest arena. "The Vazrith fleet has entered the system," Colonel Hayes announced, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "The Nexus collective ships are right behind them." He brought up a holographic display, showing two massive fleets approaching from different vectors. Both sides brought their finest ships, just as we requested. Dr. Reynolds joined them, his eyes fixed on the newly constructed arena. Hard to believe 3 weeks ago, they were ready to annihilate each other. Now look at them, racing to be the first to participate in something they don't even fully understand yet. The arena was a masterpiece of human engineering combined with alien technology. Dozens of asteroids had been hollowed out and connected, creating a vast three-dimensional space perfect for what Hayes had called the ultimate war game. "Ambassador Xerax's ship is requesting docking permission," Lieutenant Sarah Martinez reported from her communication station. "He seems excited. The translation matrix is having trouble processing his emotional state." Sterling smiled. "That's because the concept of friendly competition doesn't exist in either of their languages. We're about to introduce two ancient civilizations to something entirely new." The meeting chamber was packed with representatives from both civilizations. Supreme Commander Xarax and Prime Consciousness Lyra sat at the front, their attention fixed on the massive display screen where Hayes stood. "Welcome to the first Galactic War Games," Hayes announced, his voice carrying the same authority he'd used to command troops. "Today, you'll have the opportunity to prove your skills, demonstrate your technology, and compete for glory, all without a single casualty." The display showed a series of simulated battles, training exercises, and competitive scenarios. "Your ships will be equipped with special energy fields that simulate combat damage," Dr. Reynolds explained. "You can fight at full capacity, testing your best strategies and technologies, but no one gets hurt. This is most unusual," Prime Consciousness Lyra observed, her crystalline form shifting in patterns of curiosity. "You wish us to pretend to fight." "Not pretend," Sterling corrected. "Compete. Show everyone what your ships can do. Prove your skills. Win honor and recognition without the cost of war." She brought up images of Earth's Olympic Games, military training exercises, and sports competitions. "On Earth, we've found that competition can be just as satisfying as conflict, and far more productive." The concept took hold faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the first exhibition matches were underway. Vazrith battlecruisers danced through asteroid fields in complex maneuvers, while Nexus ships demonstrated their legendary precision. The arena's energy fields transformed deadly weapons into scoring systems, each hit adding points to an ever-changing leadership board. "They're already developing new tactics," Hayes observed, watching as a Vazrith squadron attempted a maneuver they'd seen in historical footage of Earth's air shows. "They're not just fighting, they're performing." Sterling nodded. "And look at the technical exchange requests we're getting. Both sides are so impressed with each other's ships that they're actually asking to share design ideas." She paused, checking her latest report. "The Nexus engineers are particularly interested in Vazrith engine configurations." As the games continued, something unexpected happened. The two civilizations, so long locked in bitter conflict, began to see each other in a new light. Warriors from both sides shared meals in the station's mess hall, discussing tactics and technology with growing enthusiasm. "We've created something more than a competition," Reynolds said quietly, watching as a mixed group of Vazrith and Nexus engineers excitedly discussed the possibility of a joint ship design project. "We've given them a new way to see their own strength." In the Federation's observation post, analyst Reed watched the proceedings with a mix of awe and concern. Humanity hadn't just prevented a war. They'd fundamentally changed how two of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy viewed conflict itself. And this, he realized, was only the beginning. The alien device, now mounted as a trophy in the arena's central chamber, pulsed with a pattern that matched the cheers and excitement of the games. It had found what it was looking for, a species that could turn ancient enemies into eager competitors, with nothing more than an idea and the audacity to try it. 1 year later, the Galactic Federation's Grand Chamber had changed beyond recognition. Gone were the austere decorations and rigid seating arrangements. Instead, holographic displays showed live feeds from the various competition venues throughout the galaxy, while representatives from dozens of species mingled freely, discussing everything from sports statistics to cultural exchange programs. Analyst Reed, recently promoted to Chief of Human Understanding, stood before the council with an expression that mixed pride and bewilderment. "The first Galactic Olympics have exceeded all projections," he reported, his scales shifting through patterns of excitement. "Over 300 species have registered for next year's events." High Counselor Zena, her crystalline form now decorated with Earth-inspired athletic symbols, leaned forward. "And the cultural impact? Unprecedented," Reed replied, bringing up a series of charts. "The Vazrith Nexus Joint Research Initiative has already produced 17 new technologies. Their combined space academy has a waiting list 3 years long." He paused, adding, "And that's just the beginning." On the main display, Dr. Amanda Sterling addressed a packed auditorium at the newly established Galactic Science Institute. Her lecture on imperfect solutions to perfect problems had become the most popular course in the Institute's history. Behind her, examples of human innovation mixed with alien technology created a symphony of possibilities that the galaxy's greatest minds were still struggling to fully comprehend. "The humans have done more than change how we compete," Ambassador Vex observed, his usually reserved tone carrying a note of wonder. "They've changed how we think." In the Cirrus Arena, now the crown jewel of the solar system, Colonel Hayes and Dr. Reynolds watched as the latest exhibition match unfolded. A mixed team of Vazrith and Nexus pilots demonstrated their latest innovation, a dance-like combat style that combined the best of both species' traditions. "Remember when they were ready to destroy each other?" Hayes asked, smiling as the crowd cheered a particularly spectacular maneuver. "Now look at them, co-teaching at the academy, running joint research projects." Reynolds nodded, his attention on a new set of technical readouts. The Federation's latest report shows a 400% increase in cross-species collaboration. Turns out all these advanced civilizations needed was someone to show them. it was okay to play together. The alien device, now centerpiece of the Galactic Museum of Innovation, had finally revealed its true purpose. It wasn't just a test or a tool. It was a message from an ancient race that had foreseen the need for a species like humanity. Its patterns now formed words in every known language. The greatest victory is the one that brings joy to all. Back in the Federation chamber, Lieutenant Colonel Blackwood, now Earth's chief diplomatic officer, presented the latest initiative, the Intergalactic University Games. She announced, her smile suggesting she still couldn't believe how far they'd come. Combining academic excellence with athletic achievement, every participating world will host different events, promoting both competition and cultural exchange. The chamber erupted in enthusiastic discussion. Species that had never communicated before found themselves eagerly planning joint ventures. The Federation's traditional role as peacekeeper was evolving into something new, a facilitator of collaboration and friendly competition. And what of the original containment barrier? High Counselor Zena asked Reed quietly. The one humanity turned into their own defense system. Reed's scales shifted to a pattern of amusement. They've opened it to everyone. Any species that wants to learn the technology is welcome to study it. They've turned our perfect prison into the galaxy's most advanced learning tool. As the council session ended, news arrived from the edge of known space. The first joint human-alien exploration fleet, led by Colonel Hayes and Dr. Reynolds, had made contact with a previously unknown civilization. Instead of the traditional cautious diplomatic approach, they'd invited the new species to send a team to the upcoming Galactic Olympics. Humanity hasn't just changed the game, Reed concluded his report. They've changed the rules of reality itself, and somehow they've made it fun. In the distance, beyond the solar system's edge, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The galaxy had learned to play, to compete without destroying, to find joy in the challenge rather than the conquest. And it all started because someone tried to put humanity in a box, only to discover that thinking outside the box was what humans did best.